Chapter 25 of Ruth Fielding at the War Front. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Ruth Fielding at the War Front by Alice B. Emerson. Back again. It was Ruth who finally remembered to order dinner sent up. Her letter, read, of course, by the mildly suspicious old general, had served to release Tom from present espionage. There was not even a guard in the corridor when, just before 9, the brother and sister left the rooms and strolled out of the hotel into the streets. They walked several blocks until Tom was assured that they were not spied upon. Then quickly, through several short but crooked side streets, he led Ruth to a garage in an alley. He tapped a signal on the door. The latter slid back. The purring of a motor was heard. A man silently got into the driver's seat. Tom helped Ruth into the tonneau and got in himself. "You have your papers, Captain?" asked the Count softly. "Yes, they did not take them from me." "And the ladies?" said the other. "If we are halted, you know what to say." "Quite," returned Tom in German. The car rolled out of the garage, the door of which closed as silently behind them as it had opened. Ruth made up her mind that Meuse was quite as infested with French spies as the towns behind the French lines were infested with those of the Germans. The car left the town quickly. She remembered the road over which she had traveled that morning. They entered the Marchand estate by the same rear gate where only one sleepy guard hailed them and did not even look at the papers when he observed Tom's uniform. "Farewell," whispered the Count as they approached the gardener's cottage. "I may not see you soon again, Captain, nor the Fraulein. Best of luck." They alighted. The car wheeled and was gone. Good Frau Kraus met Ruth at the door, hurried her up to the small room, and there helped her into the uniform of the sub-lieutenant of the Uhlans. When Ruth came down into the parlor of the cottage, she found 2 other officers of apparently her own regiment awaiting her. Tom rushed to her, but she only gave him her hand. "Manifestly, this is no place for renewed protestations of brotherly regard, Tommy," she said demurely. "I presume we have to go through all the difficulties we did last night, Major." And quickly muttered Major Henri Marchand, looking away from them, "There is something on foot. I should not be surprised if the promised attack and advance under barrage fire is to begin before morning." "I'm ready," the girl said simply. "Here is the car I sent for," the Frenchman said, raising his hand as he heard the automobile without. "You ahead, Captain. Remember, you are our superior officer." They filed out. The car, which the Major and Ruth had used in reaching the gardener's cottage from the German front, stood panting on the drive. The 3 got in. They wheeled around, boldly passing the front of the Marchand house where the general and his staff lived and where Tom had been an unwilling guest for 3 days, and so reached the main entrance of the estate. Here their papers were scrutinized, but superficially. Captain von Brenner's name was already known. Lieutenant Gilder and Sub-Lieutenant Loudon were remembered from the previous evening. The car started again. It slipped between the massive stone posts of the gateway. It sped toward the front, but all the peril was yet ahead. "How can we get through the German trenches if they are already filled with the shock troops that will be sent over following the barrage?" asked Tom. "We must beat them to it, as you Americans say," chuckled the Major, whose spirits seemed to rise as the peril increased. And he prophesied well in this matter. They were indeed in the trenches before the reserves were brought up for the planned attack upon the American lines. The trio of fugitives left the car at the wayside inn. They found the hidden hut and made their changes into rubber suits, an outfit being produced for Tom by the indefatigable Major Marchand. Through the shrouding darkness they went in single file to the wood directly behind the trenches. As on the previous night, the French spy had secured the password. 3 men with an evident objective up front were allowed to pass without question. Once over the top, they lay in the field until a patrol went out through the wire entanglements to spy about no man's land. The 3 joined this party, but quite unknown to its leader. Once on the black waste at the edge of the morass, the three fugitives separated from the German patrol and slipped down into the low ground. Major Marchand found the path, and for a second time there began for Ruth that wearisome and exhausting journey through the swamp. This time, whatever her failing strength and the excitement of the venture, Ruth was utterly played out when they reached the log wherein she and the Major had rested the night before. "We'll carry her between us, chair fashion," suggested Tom Cameron. "That is the way, Major. Interlock your hands with mine. Lean back, Ruthie. We'll get you out of this all right." It was a 3-hour trip to the American trenches, however, and after a while Ruth insisted upon being set down. She did not want to overburden her two companions. At the listening post an officer was sent for who recognized Major Marchand and who took Tom and Ruth on trust. The Major, too, sent the word up and down the trenches by telephone that the expected advance of the Germans was about to occur. As the three passed through the American lines, after removing the rubber suits in the dugout, they passed company after company of American troops marching into the trenches. Tom left Ruth and the Major at a certain place to report to his commander, but he promised to be in Clare the next morning to satisfy Helen of his safety. It was almost morning before the Major and Ruth secured transportation, the one to the Clare Hospital, the other to the chateau on the hill behind the village. But it was an officer's car they used, and it covered the distance less bumpily than had Charlie Bragg's ambulance. "Mademoiselle," said Major Henri Marchand in his most punctilious way, "it is in my heart to say much to you. I approve of you. I admire you. Your courage is sublime, and your modesty and goodness equally so. Forgive the warm expressions of a Frenchman who appreciates your attributes of character, as well as your graces of person. Believe me your friend forever, your devoted and humble friend, and I trust your future will be as bright as you deserve." The day was just breaking as he thus bade her good-bye, and Ruth Fielding alighted from the machine at the gateway of the hospital. She stood for a minute and watched the car disappear in the semi-darkness with this faithful soldier of France sitting so upright upon the rear seat, and she had once suspected him of disloyalty. The sentinel presented arms as she went in. She climbed wearily to her own little white cell that looked out toward the battlefront. Already the guns had begun, the big German guns, heralding an attack for which the Americans were prepared, thanks to Tom Cameron. The thundering echoes awoke Helen and Jenny. They scurried into Ruth's little room to find her sitting on the side of her cot, sipping hot tea which she had made over her alcohol lamp. "Where have you been?" cried Helen, and Jenny chimed in with, "2 whole nights and a day. It is disgraceful. Oh, Ruthie, are you really wetted?" "I'm wetted to my work," replied the girl of the Red Mill quietly. "Dear, dear, how original," drawled Jenny. "What are those guns?" demanded Helen. "Aren't they going to stop pretty soon?" "They have merely begun. You are here in time to witness, from a perfectly safe distance, a German drive. This sector will be plowed by huge shells, and our brave boys in khaki will hold the German horde back. It will be one of the hottest contested battles our boys have experienced." "Pooh, how do you know?" scoffed Helen. "I warrant it will be all over in an hour," added Jenny. "What do you know about it, Ruth Fielding? You haven't been over there to find out what is in the mind of the Hun." "Haven't I?" Ruth Fielding hesitated. Should she tell them? What would these, her 2 closest girlfriends, say or think if they knew what she had been through during the past 36 hours? Suppose she should picture her adventure to them, just as it had happened? Suppose she told them of her long journey with the French major across no man's land? "Where is Tom? Did you get word to him?" Helen asked. "He will be here this morning to see you," Ruth said, and then she went back to her thoughts of her adventure. "Goody! Dear old Tom will take us around and show us the big shell holes and all," Helen declared. Shell holes! Ruth remembered the shell hole in which they had changed steel helmets before and after crossing the swamp. How she must have looked in that shapeless rubber garment and steel hat! "What under the sun are you laughing at, Ruth Fielding?" demanded Helen. "Yes, do tell us the joke," drawled Heavy Stone. "I was just thinking of how funny it must have looked in a hat I had on since I saw you girls," Ruth was hysterical. "Well, I never!" gasped Jenny. "Dear me, Ruth," Helen said, admonishingly, "I wonder you are so light-minded at such a time as this. You are laughing when those horrid guns may be throwing shells right among our poor boys. Dear, dear, I wish they would stop." Ruth gazed at Helen with a far-away look in her eyes. "I'm not laughing," she said slowly. "Far from it." "Yes, but you did laugh," burst out Jenny. "If I did, I didn't know it," answered Ruth. "I was thinking of something else." "Oh, girls, not now. Tomorrow, perhaps, you may know about it. Now I'm tired, so tired." The two girls at last, realizing that something out of the ordinary had occurred, and seeing how near the end of her strength Ruth really was, petted her, made her as comfortable as possible, and finally left her to rest, telling her they would still take charge of the supply room, so that the girl of the Red Mill need not take up at once her duties in the hospital. End of chapter 25. End of Ruth Fielding at the War Front, or The Hunt for the Lost Soldier.